The boy woke up earlier than usual that morning. The sun had not fully risen yet, and the world outside was quiet, covered in soft mist. He rubbed his eyes and stretched his arms, then stood by the window of his small house. That was when he noticed movement near the edge of the field. At first, he thought it was a stray dog or maybe a wild deer, but then he saw it clearly. The creature was unlike anything he had ever seen. Its body was slim, covered in fur that shimmered faintly in the dim light. Its eyes glowed softly, almost like little lanterns in the fog. It did not move like an animal of earth. It was smooth, deliberate, and silent, as if it was floating just above the ground. The boy's heart started to race. He pressed his face against the cold glass, trying to see more. The animal turned its head suddenly, and its glowing eyes looked directly at him. For a moment, the boy froze, afraid it had noticed him watching. But instead of running away, the creature stared at him for a few seconds, then slowly turned and started walking toward the forest. Something in that stare pulled the boy forward. He quickly put on his shoes, slipped out the door, and followed. The grass was wet under his feet, and the cold morning air brushed his skin, but he didn't care. His mind was fixed on that strange animal. It moved ahead of him, not too fast, not too slow, as if it wanted him to keep up. The boy whispered to himself, wondering why no one else had seen this creature before. He knew every farm animal, every bird, every wild beast in the area. But this was different. Something told him it was not from this world. The deeper he went into the field, the stranger things became. The mist grew thicker, and he could barely see the creature's glowing eyes moving ahead like two tiny stars guiding him. Every time he thought he might lose it, the animal stopped and looked back, making sure he was still there. The boy felt a mix of fear and excitement. He wanted to turn back, but curiosity was stronger. He had to know what this creature was and why it wanted him to follow. Soon, he reached the edge of the forest. The trees stood tall and dark, blocking the light of the rising sun. The creature slipped inside without hesitation. The boy stopped for a second, his breath quick and shallow. Everyone in the village warned him never to go into the forest alone. Strange sounds were often heard there at night, and sometimes hunters returned saying they saw shadows that did not belong to any animal they knew. But the boy clenched his fists. He had already come this far. He could not stop now. The forest was alive with whispers. Leaves rustled, even though there was no wind. The ground was soft, covered in moss that dampened his steps. He could still see the glowing eyes of the creature ahead, moving deeper into the dark. Every time the boy stepped on a branch and it cracked loudly under his foot, he felt his heart jump into his throat. Yet the creature kept moving, almost like it was leading him somewhere important. He noticed something odd about its path. The creature was not walking randomly. It left marks on the ground, faint scratches like symbols drawn by its claws. The boy bent down to touch one, and it felt warm, as if energy still lingered there. His fingers tingled, and he quickly pulled his hand back. His chest filled with unease, but also wonder. Was the animal trying to tell him something? As he walked further, the forest seemed to change. The trees twisted in strange shapes, their bark glowing faintly with blue lines like veins of light. The air grew heavier, humming softly like a distant drum. He had never seen anything like this before. It felt as if he had stepped out of his world and into another. He glanced at the creature again, and for a second he thought he saw its form shift, like it wasn't just an animal, but something else hiding inside. The boy's mind spun with questions. Was this creature dangerous? Was it trying to trap him? But deep inside, he felt it was not leading him to harm. Its eyes, though strange and glowing, did not feel cruel. They felt almost protective. Then, suddenly, the creature stopped. The boy froze behind a tree, peeking out. The animal stood at the mouth of a shadowy cave, its body glowing brighter now, lighting up the rocks around it. The boy could hear his own heartbeat pounding in his ears. He had never seen this cave before, and he had explored these woods many times with his friends. It was like the cave had been hidden until now, revealed only to him. The creature turned once more, locking eyes with him. The boy shivered, not from the cold, but from the weight of that look. It was not the look of an animal. It was as if someone or something was asking him to step closer, to enter a secret place where no human had gone before. He swallowed hard, his hands trembling. Part of him screamed to run back home, to forget everything, and never tell a soul. But another part, the stronger one, pushed him forward. He took a careful step, then another. The cave seemed to breathe, a faint glow pulsing from within, like a heartbeat. The creature slipped inside, its tail vanishing into the darkness. The boy stood at the edge, his chest tight with fear and wonder. He knew that if he crossed this line, his life would never be the same. He closed his eyes for a second, gathering courage. Then he took a deep breath and stepped into the cave, following the mysterious animal into the unknown. The cave was colder than the air outside, and the boy felt a chill run down his back as he stepped inside. His footsteps echoed softly against the stone floor, and each sound seemed louder than it should have been. The creature's glowing eyes moved ahead like two tiny lanterns guiding him deeper. He kept his eyes fixed on it, afraid that if he blinked too long, he might lose sight of it forever. The walls of the cave pulsed faintly with light, like veins carrying some kind of energy through the rock. The boy brushed his fingers along the surface, and it tingled like static electricity, making the hairs on his arms stand straight. The cave twisted and turned, leading him lower and lower underground. The further he went, the heavier the air became, almost as if it was pressing against his chest. His breathing grew shallow, but he forced himself to keep walking. Every time he thought about stopping, the creature would pause and glance back at him, its glowing eyes filled with something that felt like expectation. It was as though it wanted him there, as though it needed him to see something important. The boy's mind raced with questions. Why him? Why not his father or some hunter from the village? He was just a boy, not a warrior, not even old enough to join the men in their tasks. Yet here he was, following a creature that should not even exist, into a place that felt like it belonged to another world. The thought made him shiver, but at the same time, he felt a strange excitement growing inside him. He was walking into a mystery bigger than anything he had ever imagined. As he walked deeper, he began to hear faint sounds. At first, he thought it was just the dripping of water from the ceiling. But then he realized the rhythm was too even, too soft, almost like whispers. He froze and strained his ears. Yes, it was whispering, faint and distant, words he could not understand. The language was strange, not human, not anything he had ever heard before. His skin prickled and his heart thumped faster. He wanted to cover his ears, but curiosity held him still. The creature did not seem alarmed. It kept moving, its glowing fur shimmering brighter with each step. The whispers grew louder as they went deeper. Shadows danced on the walls, though there was no fire or torch to cast them. Sometimes the shadows looked like figures, tall, thin beings with elongated heads and strange limbs. The boy blinked hard, but when he opened his eyes again, the shadows were gone. His imagination must be playing tricks on him, he thought. Yet, deep inside, he wondered if they were really there, watching him, waiting. The path suddenly widened, opening into a vast underground chamber. The ceiling was so high he could barely see it. The ground sparkled with crystals, glowing softly in different colors, blue, green, and purple. The light reflected off the walls, filling the place with an otherworldly glow. The boy's mouth fell open in awe. He had never seen anything so beautiful and so frightening at the same time. The creature moved gracefully across the chamber, its paws leaving trails of light behind as if it was writing in the air. The boy followed carefully, his eyes darting everywhere. Strange plants grew in the cracks of the stones, their leaves glowing faintly and releasing a sweet, heavy smell. The air buzzed softly, almost like the humming of insects, but deeper, vibrating in his bones. He felt like he had stepped out of the world he knew and into a place where human rules did not exist. Then he noticed something else, the marks again. The same symbols he had seen scratched into the forest floor were carved into the walls of the chamber, larger and brighter here. They glowed as if alive, pulsing in rhythm with the faint hum of the cave. He reached out to touch one, and the moment his skin brushed the glowing lines, a shock ran through his body. His vision blurred, and for a brief second, he saw images. He saw stars, battles in the sky, and towering alien ships firing beams of light. He stumbled back, gasping, and clutched his chest. The images vanished as quickly as they came, leaving him trembling. The creature stopped and turned its glowing eyes on him. It tilted its head slightly, as if studying him. The boy swallowed hard, trying to calm his pounding heart. He realized now this was not just an animal. It was something far more intelligent. Maybe it was testing him, showing him pieces of something he was not yet ready to understand. He wanted to ask questions, to speak, but his voice would not come out. Instead, he followed again, his legs shaky but his will stronger than before. The whispers around him grew louder, and now he thought he could almost make out words, though they still made no sense. They echoed through his mind like a chant, filling him with both fear and wonder. The creature led him to another narrow tunnel at the far end of the chamber. The boy hesitated before entering, but the animal's glowing tail flicked, urging him on. The tunnel was tighter, the walls close enough to brush his shoulders. Strange roots hung from the ceiling, glowing faintly as if filled with liquid light. Some of them dripped a thick substance that hissed when it touched the floor. The boy ducked his head and moved carefully, his heart racing. Finally, the tunnel opened into a smaller cave, but what he saw made him freeze. The walls were lined with broken cages, strange metal structures bent and twisted, their bars glowing faintly with leftover energy. Some were open, some shattered, but all of them looked like they had once held living things. The boy's throat went dry. He stepped closer, his hands trembling. Who had been kept here? And more importantly, why? The creature stood silently at the center of the room, its glowing eyes locked on him. For the first time, the boy felt the weight of its stare. It was not asking him to follow anymore. It was waiting, as if he needed to understand something before they could go further. The boy's chest tightened with unease. The whispers were louder than ever, circling around him like voices of ghosts. He looked at the broken cages again, and his imagination filled with images, creatures trapped, struggling, crying out. He shook his head, trying to push the thoughts away, but they clung to him like shadows. In that moment, he realized he had stepped into something far darker than he expected. The forest had been strange. The cave had been mysterious, but this was something else, something that carried secrets, secrets too big for a boy to hold. Yet he could not turn back now. The animal's glowing eyes would not let him. It wanted him to see everything, no matter how frightening it became. The boy took a shaky breath, clenched his fists, and forced himself to step closer to the broken cages, ready to face whatever truth waited for him in the darkness. The boy stood still for a long time, staring at the broken cages. His heartbeat echoed in his ears, faster than the whispers that filled the cave. The air smelled strange, a mix of metal and something sour, like old blood that had dried long ago. He swallowed hard and forced himself to move closer. His shoes scraped against the stone floor, each sound bouncing off the cave walls. He bent down and touched one of the bent bars. It was cold, but a faint energy still vibrated through it, sending a shiver up his arm. He quickly pulled his hand away and wiped it on his clothes, as if the metal had left something dirty on his skin. He turned his eyes back to the animal. It stood silently in the middle of the room, glowing softly, its eyes fixed on him. There was no anger, no fear in its stare. It was calm, almost patient, like a teacher waiting for a student to understand a difficult lesson. The boy's lips trembled. He wanted to ask out loud what this place was, but he could not make his voice work. Instead, he looked around, his eyes scanning every corner of the small chamber. Symbols were carved into the walls, more of the same glowing marks he had seen earlier. Some of them pulsed like they were alive, beating slowly like a heart. Others flickered faintly, almost dying out. He traced one of the glowing lines with his eyes and noticed it connected to the cages, wrapping around them like chains of light. His chest tightened. He realized now that these cages had not just been simple prisons. They were part of something bigger, something powerful. Suddenly, he felt a rush of cold air pass over him. He spun around, but the tunnel behind him was empty. The whispers grew louder, sharper, almost like they were pressing inside his head. He covered his ears, but the sound did not stop. The voices were not outside. They were inside him. He stumbled backward and fell against the wall, his eyes wide with fear. Images flashed before him, quick and blurry. He saw shapes, tall beings with glowing skin, chains wrapped around them, their mouths open in silent screams. He saw fire raining down from the sky, battles in the stars, and humans standing shoulder to shoulder with strange creatures. His breath caught in his throat. None of it made sense, but it felt real. too real. When the images faded, he was left shaking, his body cold with sweat. He looked at the animal again, and this time, something was different. Its form flickered for a second. For a brief moment, it did not look like an animal at all, but like a figure of light wrapped in a beast's shape. Then it was back to normal, staring at him with those glowing eyes. The boy's stomach twisted. This was no ordinary creature. It was something else, something pretending to be what it was not. He stood up slowly, his legs unsteady. "What are you?" he whispered, though his voice was barely more than a breath. Of course, the creature did not answer, but it turned and walked toward a corner of the cave where the shadows were darkest. It paused there, waiting for him. The boy hesitated. Every instinct told him to run back to the village, to forget everything he had seen. But his curiosity, the same curiosity that had led him here, pushed him forward. He followed. In the shadows, he found another passage, narrow and hidden behind a curtain of roots. The creature slipped through easily. The boy pushed the roots aside and squeezed in after it. The tunnel was even darker than before, but the faint glow from the animal lit the way. The ground was damp, and water dripped from the ceiling, landing on his neck and sending chills down his spine. After a few minutes of walking, the tunnel opened again, this time into a vast cavern much larger than the last one. The boy gasped. In the center of the cavern stood a giant crystal, taller than any tree he had ever seen. It pulsed with bright blue light, sending waves of energy across the walls. Strange machines, old and broken, surrounded the crystal. Some were covered in dust, others cracked and silent. The whole place looked ancient, abandoned for centuries, yet alive in some strange way. The boy stepped closer, his eyes wide. He could feel the energy in the air, humming in his bones. He reached out his hand, drawn to the crystal like a moth to flame. Just as his fingers were about to touch it, the animal growled softly. The sound was low but firm, like a warning. The boy froze, his hand hanging in the air. He looked at the creature, and for the first time, he saw fear in its eyes. Not fear of the crystal, but fear of what might happen if he touched it. He pulled his hand back slowly, his chest rising and falling quickly. He backed away and looked around again. The machines, the crystal, the cages, it all connected. This was no ordinary cave. It was something left behind by beings far greater than humans, a secret hidden beneath the forest, waiting for someone to find it. The boy felt his knees weaken. He wanted to scream, to run, to wake up, and realize this was only a dream. But deep down, he knew it was real. Every sound, every glow, every whisper told him he had stumbled onto something that could change everything. His life. His village, maybe even the whole world. The animal walked to the base of the crystal and sat down, still watching him. It was clear now that it had brought him here for a reason. It wanted him to see this place, to understand something important. But what? Why him? He was just a boy. He wasn't ready for something this big. The whispers returned, softer now, almost gentle. They seemed to be calling his name. He pressed his hands against his ears, but this time he didn't feel scared. He felt chosen, as if the voices were telling him that he had a part to play in whatever this was. He shivered, not from cold, but from the weight of the thought. The boy stood in the middle of the cavern, staring at the crystal, the broken machines, the cages, and the glowing animal. His heart pounded in his chest, his mind filled with questions, but one truth burned brighter than all of them. He was no longer just a boy chasing a mysterious animal. He had stepped into a secret older than his people, a secret waiting to change everything. The boy stood frozen, staring at the glowing crystal and the strange machines around it. His chest felt heavy as if he carried a secret too big for him. The animal sat calmly at the base of the crystal, its glowing eyes fixed on him, waiting. The silence pressed on his ears, broken only by the faint hum of the crystal. He took a shaky step forward, unsure of what to do. Suddenly, the crystal flared with light brighter than the sun, and the whole cavern shook. The boy shielded his eyes with his arm, but even through closed lids, he saw the flash. When he opened his eyes again, the cavern was no longer dark. Floating in the air were shapes of light, moving slowly, like ghosts telling a story. He gasped and stumbled back, but the animal growled softly, urging him to stay. The lights shifted into clear images. He saw alien figures, tall and elegant, with glowing skin and eyes like stars. They stood beside humans, Men and women dressed in old armor, holding weapons of both steel and strange energy. They were not fighting each other. They were fighting side by side against something far worse. The scene changed. Ships soared through the sky, alien and human together, their weapons firing at a massive dark fleet. The enemy ships were huge, sharp like blades, and they spat fire that tore through planets. Explosions lit up the stars, and screams echoed through the cavern, though no real voices were there. The boy's hands trembled. He wanted to look away, but he couldn't. The images forced him to watch. Then he saw a man. At first, just another soldier, but as the image grew clearer, the boy felt his breath catch. The man looked familiar. His face, his eyes, it was his father, only younger, standing beside one of the alien leaders. His father fought bravely, protecting the creatures as if they were his own people. The boy's heart pounded. He had never heard this story. No one in the village had spoken of this. His father had always seemed like an ordinary man, quiet and strong, never boasting of old battles. But here, in this secret cave, the truth was painted in light. The boy stepped closer, his mouth dry. He reached out, and the image of his father shifted. He saw him carrying a wounded alien on his back, shielding it from fire, shouting words the boy could not hear. He saw his father stand before the crystal, just as the boy stood now, his hand glowing as if chosen. The alien leader bowed to him, placing something in his hand, a device, a small object that pulsed with light. The image blurred, and then the scene shifted again. The battle was over. The dark fleet was gone, but so were many of the humans and aliens. The ground was littered with bodies, smoke rising from broken machines. The survivors stood weak and silent. The aliens turned to the humans, sadness in their glowing eyes. They placed their hands on the humans' shoulders, as if promising something. But then the images faded, leaving only the boy's father staring out at him one last time before disappearing into the light. The cavern returned to silence, the only glow coming from the crystal. The boy's legs felt weak, and he sank to his knees. His mind was spinning. His father had been part of this war, part of a bond between humans and these creatures. Why had no one told him? Why was it hidden? The boy thought of the broken cages. Were they for the enemies his father fought? Or were they for allies who were betrayed? The questions gnawed at his chest. The animal rose and walked slowly to the boy. It lowered its head, and its form flickered again. For a moment, the beast's body peeled away, and he saw its true shape. It was not an animal at all. It was a guardian, a being of pure energy, wearing the skin of a beast to survive in this world. The boy's mouth opened in shock. Its eyes glowed brighter, and the air vibrated as another vision filled the cave. This time, it was no war. It was a promise. He saw humans and aliens together, building something new, something peaceful. Children played with alien creatures, laughing, unafraid. The crystal glowed brighter, showing a future where both races lived as one. But the image cracked suddenly, and the vision turned dark. He saw fire again, saw humans betraying the aliens, saw cages filled with suffering. The crystal's light flickered as if torn between two possible futures. The boy's heart sank. The message was clear. The future was not yet decided. It could be peace, or it could be ruin. The animal's glowing eyes locked on him again, and the boy felt the weight of its stare. He understood now. His father had been chosen once, long ago, to protect this bond. But now it was his turn. That was why the creature had come for him. That was why it had led him here. The responsibility was his, even if he was just a boy. Tears filled his eyes, not from fear, but from the weight of it all. He thought of his father, working in silence all these years, carrying this secret. He thought of his village, who knew nothing of the danger that could return. He thought of the animal, no, the guardian, who had trusted him enough to bring him here. His chest tightened with determination. He was not ready, but he could not run from this. The crystal had shown him the truth, and now it burned inside him like fire. He stood slowly, his fists clenched, his body shaking with both fear and resolve. The guardian stepped back, giving him space. The cavern seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The boy whispered softly, his voice trembling, "I will not turn away." The crystal pulsed once, as if it had heard him, and the whispers returned, softer this time, almost like a song. For the first time, they did not frighten him. They wrapped around him, filling his heart with strength. The cavern glowed brighter, and the boy realized everything had changed. He was no longer just following a strange animal. He was standing in his father's place, chosen by something greater, with a future yet to be written. The boy stood near the crystal, his heart still heavy with the visions he had seen. His father's face lingered in his mind, mixed with the voices that had whispered through the cavern. He felt smaller than ever, but at the same time, there was a fire inside him that had not been there before. The guardian, glowing faintly, circled him once and then stopped near the entrance of another tunnel. Its eyes glimmered as if telling him the journey was not over. He hesitated, then nodded slowly and followed. The tunnel twisted downward, and the deeper they went, the louder the humming of the earth became. It was like the stone itself was alive, vibrating softly beneath his feet. Drops of water fell from the ceiling, echoing like distant drums. He tightened his fists to keep his courage steady. Every shadow looked alive, and the whispers had not left him. They were quieter now, but still there, like a warning in the back of his mind. Suddenly, the tunnel opened into a wide cavern. The boy stopped, his breath catching in his throat. All around the chamber stood figures, tall and armored, with strange weapons in their hands. Their eyes glowed faintly, and their armor shimmered like liquid metal. At first, he thought they were statues, but then one of them moved. The boy gasped. These were not statues. These were hunters, real aliens, and they had been waiting. The Guardians' eyes flared brighter as the hunters stepped closer, surrounding them. Their movements were quick, silent, practiced. The boy stumbled back, but the hunters did not attack immediately. Instead, one of them raised its weapon, a long staff with glowing edges, and spoke in a sharp language. The words were harsh, filled with anger. Though the boy could not understand, he knew the meaning well enough. They saw him as an intruder. The guardian growled, a low sound that shook the chamber. Its glowing body seemed to expand, light spilling from its skin. The hunters hissed, their weapons crackling with energy. The boy's heart raced faster than ever. He realized now why the guardian had brought him here. This was not just about secrets of the past. This was about danger in the present. The hunters had followed the guardian, and now they had found him too. One of the hunters lunged forward, striking the ground near his feet. The boy fell backward, scraping his hands on the stone. The guardian leaped in front of him, its body flashing with light as it struck the hunter back. Sparks filled the air, and the sound of metal crashing against energy echoed through the cavern. The boy covered his ears, trembling, but forced himself to watch. The guardian fought fiercely, but the hunters were many, and they moved with deadly precision. The boy realized with horror that they were not after the guardian alone. Their glowing eyes kept flicking toward him. They wanted him too. Maybe they knew he had seen the visions. Maybe they knew the crystal had chosen him. Whatever the reason, he was a target now. His chest tightened with fear, but also anger. He was not just a boy anymore. He could not hide behind the guardian forever. He scrambled to his feet and looked around desperately. That was when he saw it, an alien weapon lying half buried in the dirt, old and broken, but still glowing faintly. He rushed to it and picked it up. It was heavier than it looked, a strange mix of metal and crystal, and it hummed softly in his hands. He had no idea how to use it, but the moment his fingers touched the grip, the weapon flared with light. The hunters froze for a brief second, their eyes widening. The boy's breath hitched. Somehow, the weapon had recognized him. The guardian roared and attacked again, giving the boy a chance. He held the weapon tight, his arms shaking, and pointed it at the nearest hunter. The weapon hummed louder, and before he could even think, a burst of energy shot out. The blast struck the hunter's chest, throwing it backward into the stone wall. The boy gasped in shock at what he had done. The other hunters turned on him immediately, their eyes burning brighter. Fear clawed at him, but he gritted his teeth. He was no longer just running. He swung the weapon again, its light flashing through the chamber. The hunters advanced, but the guardian moved to shield him, their fight becoming one. The boy fired again, missing one but forcing them to scatter. His hands stung, his arms ached, but he kept going. The chamber shook with the sounds of battle, growls, energy blasts, the clash of alien metal. The boy's lungs burned, his legs wanted to give out, but something deeper kept him standing. Every time he fired, he thought of his father in the visions, fighting side by side with the aliens. Every time he aimed, he remembered the crystal's promise of a future not yet written. He could not let fear win. But the hunters were many, and their skill was greater. Slowly, they pushed closer, surrounding them again. The guardian bled light now, its movements slower. The boy's stomach sank. If they lost here, everything would end before it had even begun. He clutched the weapon tighter, his knuckles white. His mind screamed at him to find a way, to do something. Then, suddenly, one of the hunters shouted, a command in its harsh tongue. They stopped their attack and stood still, weapons lowered but not put away. The boy blinked in confusion. Why had they stopped? The lead hunter stepped forward, its tall frame casting a shadow over him. It pointed at the boy's weapon, then at the crystal. Its meaning was clear. They wanted him to come with them. The boy's chest heaved. He looked at the guardian, which staggered but still stood between him and the hunters. Its eyes glowed with fierce defiance, but also with warning. This was not just a fight. This was a choice. He could surrender, go with the hunters, and maybe learn more about why they wanted him. Or he could resist, stand with the guardian, and risk death right here in the cave. His mind swirled with fear, confusion, and determination. He tightened his grip on the weapon, his heart pounding in his chest. The hunters waited, their eyes burning with silent threat. The guardian growled, light flickering across its body, ready to protect him no matter the cost. The boy took a deep breath. He knew whatever choice he made would change everything. Not just for him, but for the bond between humans and aliens, for the secret his father had carried, and for the future the crystal had shown him. He raised his weapon slowly, his decision burning in his eyes. The cavern seemed to freeze, waiting for the moment that would decide his fate. The boy stepped forward cautiously, his eyes never leaving the lead hunter. His hands still shook from the last battle, but there was a determination in him now that could not be broken. The weapon in his hands hummed softly, reacting to his heartbeat, as if it knew his fear and courage at the same time. The guardian, battered but not defeated, stood behind him, its glowing body casting strange shadows across the cavern walls. The hunters watched silently, waiting for him to make the next move. He knew he could not fight them all alone. Each hunter was strong, their movements precise and dangerous. He remembered the stories his father had told him about courage and strategy, about how even the smallest person could outsmart a larger enemy with patience and observation. Slowly, he began to circle, keeping his back to the guardian and eyes on the hunters. He studied their stances, the way they held their weapons, the small shifts in their weight. Each detail mattered. Suddenly, one hunter stepped forward, testing him. The boy tightened his grip and fired a small burst of energy from the weapon, just enough to scare but not harm. The hunter jumped back, surprised. The boy realized he could use this to his advantage. His weapon was not just powerful, it was unpredictable. The hunters were cautious now, uncertain of what it might do next. He motioned toward a narrow tunnel on the side of the cavern, almost hidden in shadows. The hunters followed his gaze. He knew they expected him to flee, to escape like a frightened child. But that was not his plan. He would lead them somewhere he could control, somewhere the guardian could help him. He moved slowly toward the tunnel, weapon raised, keeping the hunters' attention on him. As he walked, the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly. He had noticed this earlier. The cavern was unstable in places. If he could lure the hunters onto a weaker section, the battle could turn in his favor. He took careful steps, pretending to stumble slightly, and the hunters advanced. One by one, they moved closer, their glowing eyes fixed on him. The guardian followed silently, ready to leap at any moment. When the hunters reached the weak part of the ground, the boy made his move. He leaped to the side, aiming a controlled blast of energy from his weapon at the floor. The ground cracked and collapsed, sending the nearest hunter falling into a deep pit. The others froze, shocked by his quick thinking. The boy's heart pounded in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. Every second counted. The guardian roared and charged at the remaining hunters, its glowing body blinding them for a moment. The boy fired again, keeping the hunters off balance. One stumbled. Another tried to attack, but the boy anticipated their moves. He realized that the weapon responded not just to him, but to his intentions, almost like it could read his mind. Each shot was precise, each movement calculated. The hunters regrouped quickly, realizing they could not rely on brute force alone. They began to communicate in sharp tones, pointing and signaling. The boy could not understand their language, but he could see the strategy forming. They were surrounding him, trying to cut off his escape. Panic threatened to rise, but he clenched his teeth and focused. He would not fail here. He had to think faster, move faster, and trust the Guardian to cover him. He remembered the crystal's glow from earlier, the visions that had shown him glimpses of the past and future. Maybe it could guide him now. He raised the weapon higher, letting the faint light from the crystal-infused energy illuminate the cavern. The hunters hesitated, momentarily blinded by the brilliance. The boy knew this was his chance. He directed the Guardian to strike from the side while he fired bursts that forced the hunters to retreat backward. One hunter lunged at him with incredible speed, weapon raised. The boy barely had time to react. He dodged to the side and aimed his weapon at the hunter's feet. A bright blast of energy shot out, knocking the hunter off balance. The Guardian followed up, sweeping the hunter away with a powerful strike. The boy exhaled sharply, realizing how close he had come to being injured. But he did not stop. He could not. He noticed a narrow bridge across a chasm in the cavern, just wide enough for a person and the Guardian to cross. If he could get the hunters onto that bridge, it would become a trap. He moved cautiously, keeping the hunters' attention on him. Each step was measured, each movement designed to guide them toward the bridge. The hunters were clever, but the boy was cleverer now, using the cavern itself as his ally. As they reached the bridge, the boy prepared his final strategy. He aimed the weapon at a large crystal embedded in the wall near the bridge. A focused blast shattered the crystal, sending pieces crashing down and creating a small landslide. The hunters froze, realizing too late that the bridge was unstable. One by one, they lost footing and fell into the chasm below. The boy's heart raced, but he kept firing small bursts to keep any remaining hunters back. When the last hunter fell, silence filled the cavern. The boy leaned heavily on his weapon, exhausted but exhilarated. The Guardian approached, glowing brighter now, as if acknowledging his bravery. The boy could feel a bond forming between them, stronger than before. They had survived the hunters, and he had proven to himself that he could face danger and think clearly under pressure. The boy looked around the cavern, taking in the damage and chaos. The walls shimmered with faint light, reflecting the remnants of the battle. The ground was scarred, and the air still hummed with residual energy from the weapon. But the boy felt something else too, a sense of purpose. He knew this was just a step in a larger journey. The crystal, the Guardian, the hunters, they were all pieces of a puzzle he had yet to solve. He approached the Guardian, placing a hand on its glowing arm. The warmth and light seemed to flow into him, calming his racing heart. He could hear the soft hum of the weapon, now quiet but still powerful. The boy realized that he had changed. He was no longer just a curious child following an animal. He had faced danger, made decisions, and discovered strength he never knew he had. As he and the Guardian moved toward the tunnel leading deeper into the cavern, the boy looked back one last time. The hunters were gone, defeated by his strategy and courage. But he knew they might return, or that other challenges awaited. He gripped the weapon tighter, ready for whatever came next. With the Guardian by his side and the crystal guiding him, he felt ready to face the unknown. The journey was far from over, but for the first time, the boy felt truly powerful. He had survived, outsmarted the hunters, and learned to trust himself. Every step forward would be a test, but he was no longer afraid. The light of the weapon and the Guardian's glow lit their path as they disappeared into the darkness, moving toward the mysteries that awaited them deeper in the cavern. The boy stepped carefully into the cavern's deepest section, his senses alert to every sound and movement. The air was thick with mist, and strange shadows danced across the walls, making familiar shapes appear threatening. His Guardian followed silently, glowing softly to light the path ahead. The weapon in his hands hummed with energy, ready to respond to the boy's thoughts. Every step felt heavier, as if the cavern itself was testing him, making him doubt his courage. But he pressed forward, determined to reach the source of the mysterious energy that had led him here. The cavern opened into a massive chamber, unlike anything the boy had ever seen. Crystals of all sizes jutted out from the ground, walls, and ceiling, reflecting light in every direction. The air vibrated with an almost musical hum, and the boy felt it in his bones, a power older and stronger than anything he had encountered. In the center of the chamber, a massive, shadowy figure emerged, its form shifting constantly, like it was made of smoke and light at the same time. The boy froze for a moment, realizing this was not an ordinary creature. It was intelligent, ancient, and aware of his presence. The figure spoke without words, its voice echoing in the boy's mind. It tested him, asking questions not of language, but of courage and intention. The boy realized that his choices, his past actions, and his very heart were being measured. Fear surged through him, but he remembered the lessons of strategy, trust, and bravery he had learned from the Guardian and from his earlier battles. He stood tall, trying to radiate confidence, knowing the figure could sense hesitation. Suddenly, the figure shifted, revealing smaller shapes within it, creatures that seemed trapped, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. The boy understood that they were not enemies, but prisoners of the figure's immense power. Compassion filled him, even as he felt the tension of the challenge. He knew he had to act carefully. Any wrong move could harm them or trigger the figure's anger. He took a deep breath and stepped closer, the weapon pulsing as if acknowledging the rightness of his heart. He began to communicate, not with words, but with intentions and gestures. The figure responded slowly, circling him, testing his honesty and resolve. The Guardian moved close, providing a shield of glowing energy around the boy. He felt the bond between them stronger than ever, the Guardian's presence calming his nerves and strengthening his courage. Each pulse from his weapon seemed to harmonize with the cavern's hum, resonating with the ancient figure in ways he could barely understand. The shadowy figure then made a sudden movement, splitting into multiple forms that swirled around him. The boy's instincts kicked in. He had to focus, keep his mind clear, and trust the weapon and Guardian. He moved with agility, dodging the swirling shadows while aiming precise bursts of energy at non-threatening targets to test reactions. He noticed patterns in the figure's movements, tiny openings that hinted at weaknesses or areas of sensitivity. This was no ordinary battle. It was a test of perception, courage, and wisdom. Time seemed to stretch as he continued, each movement deliberate and careful. The figure's forms shifted more aggressively, testing both his mental focus and physical endurance. The boy felt exhaustion creeping in, but he forced himself to breathe steadily and maintain control. The Guardian stayed by his side, intercepting attacks that could harm him, its glowing body creating a protective barrier. Together, they formed a synchronized team, balancing offense and defense with fluidity and precision. The boy realized that the key was not to defeat the figure through strength alone, but through understanding and trust. He began to mimic the figure's movements subtly, matching its rhythm, showing that he was not an enemy, but a worthy companion. The figure paused, its forms flickering in a way that suggested surprise. The boy pressed forward carefully, extending his hand as if offering friendship, letting the Guardian's energy envelop both him and the figure. Slowly, the shadows within the figure became more distinct, showing clear forms of the trapped creatures. The boy could sense relief from them, their fear diminishing. The figure's voice echoed in his mind again, softer this time, acknowledging his courage, compassion, and cleverness. He had passed the test, not by overpowering it, but by proving he understood balance, empathy, and bravery. The figure's forms gradually coalesced into a singular, glowing entity, radiating warmth and calm. The boy approached the entity carefully, still holding his weapon, now more as a symbol of readiness than threat. The Guardian moved beside him, offering support and silent guidance. He reached out, touching the glowing form gently, feeling an immense flow of energy and knowledge pass into him. Visions of the cavern's history, the purpose of the trapped creatures, and the ancient power that protected them filled his mind. He understood the responsibility he now carried and the choices he would have to make in the future. The creatures that had been trapped within the figure slowly stepped forward, their forms clearer and more defined. They looked at the boy with gratitude and curiosity, sensing the courage and purity of his heart. The boy felt a strong connection with them, realizing he had earned their trust. The Guardian nuzzled him lightly, affirming the bond they shared and the harmony they had created in the chamber. As the cavern began to stabilize, the shadows receded, the hum softened, and a path forward became visible. The boy knew this journey was far from over. The knowledge and power he had gained from the figure and the creatures would guide him, but he would need to continue to rely on courage, strategy, and trust. He understood that true strength was not just in fighting, but in understanding, compassion, and cleverness. The boy took a deep breath, ready to continue. He glanced at the guardian, and together they began moving toward the newly revealed path. Each step felt lighter now, the weight of fear replaced by confidence. The cavern, once daunting and mysterious, now seemed like a place of opportunity and discovery. He was no longer just a boy with a strange weapon and a guardian. He was a protector, a strategist, and a brave soul capable of facing the greatest mysteries. The creatures and the ancient entity watched silently, their presence a reminder of the lessons he had learned: courage, empathy, strategy, and trust. The boy understood that he was part of a larger story, one that would continue beyond this cavern, beyond the immediate dangers, toward greater adventures and challenges. With the guardian by his side and the knowledge gained from this encounter, he felt ready to face whatever awaited him next. The boy and his guardian walked forward, deeper into the cavern, hearts steady, minds sharp, and spirits unbroken. The light from the weapon and the glow from the guardian illuminated the path, revealing not only the way forward, but the potential for growth, discovery, and unimagined bravery. The mysterious figure had not only tested him, but also prepared him for the challenges ahead, leaving him wiser, stronger, and ready to embrace his destiny.